Welcome to Steps to Publishing Your Comprehensible Reader from What's Your Next Step? I'm Kirsten Plante.
And I'm Annie Ewing. And this is step 2 in our series of video tutorials to help you build a glossary step by step for your novel. Clean up your word list. When you're watching this video, you probably have already created a word list. Now you're ready to start thinking about the kind of glossary you want to build. Let's start with why. Why do you need a glossary in a language learner novel? For us, when we look at a comprehensible novel, we imagine a reader who gets so wrapped up in the story that they don't want to stop and look something up. And when they do, it's because they absolutely have to understand a particular word to move forward in the story. So the glossary has to provide them with just the right meaning as quickly as possible and let them get back to reading. Keeping that why in mind helps us make important decisions at each step along the way as we build a glossary for our comprehensible reader.
So what are those steps again? Step 1 is create a word list. You've done this already, or you can do it now by following the steps that Margarita Perez Garcia describes in our first tutorial. Step 2, clean up your word list. This is what this tutorial is about. We will show you how to prevent extra work in a later stage by cleaning up your word list and making it as accurate as possible. Step 3 is find hidden entries. We will help you look for expressions and words that may have gotten lost in your word list, but that are essential in your text, so you may want to have them in your glossary. Step 4 is all about entering meanings. The video will guide you through decisions that help your glossary provide just the right support for your readers. In assigning meaning to each entry, we may also find other hidden entries or notice things that we missed or that were obscured in the sorting and cleanup phase. And finally, step 5. Transfer and format. Here we'll guide you through the mechanical task of converting your spreadsheet columns into an attractively formatted glossary and transferring it to your manuscript in MS Word. We will also give you some tips on the visual elements that can make or break the user-friendliness of your glossary.
As with all of the steps we share in our video tutorials, not every writer or glossary creator will follow these steps in sequence or do things the way we model them here. You may choose to do things differently. The aim of this series is to highlight aspects of the process you may think about as you develop this essential reading support for your text. If you watched our video for step 1 with Margarita Perez Garcia, you should now have a word list in a spreadsheet that's been sorted into alphabetical order. The word list you generated from your text will need some sorting out and cleaning up before it will make a good basis for your glossary. For the remaining videos in this series, we will share examples from word lists in French and Spanish. Author Teresa Marama has kindly granted us permission to use her novels La Maison du 13 Rue Verdon in French and La Casa de la Calle Verdon in Spanish as the basis for our glossary. However, most of our examples will be relevant to other languages as well. I will show examples in French using Google Docs and Google Sheets.
I will give examples in Spanish using MS Word and MS Excel, and everything we show you can be done in both platforms in similar ways.
Are you ready to clean up your word list? Let's get started.
The securest way to clean your word list is to walk through it from A to Z, line by line, checking it for each of the following items: typos, unexpected words, stray punctuation, capitalization, word order, and onomatopoeia, or expressions like and well.
You may want to focus on each item in a separate pass. For example, look for typos from A to Z, and then go back and look for unexpected words from A to Z, and so on. Or you may want to work from A to Z, thinking about each entry in terms of all 6 issues. On this first pass, you're just making sure that every form in your glossary occurs in the text, and every form in the text appears in your glossary. And where they don't, you fix it, either in the text or in the glossary.
Find typos and correct them. Your word list is a great help when you're looking for typos. You'll find typos more easily because you're reading a text from top to bottom and you're focusing on one word at the time. And that means that you notice errors more easily than when you're reading a text. Also, misspelled words will usually be just above or just below the correctly spelled word, which makes it easier to notice them as well. Looking at the Spanish glossary, we'll check the words one by one. It looks good so far. But here we see that atención seems to appear twice, but the second time is actually a misspelled word. And we are going to change that in a Word document in a minute. Now we want to take it out, but before we do that, we will add the number of times atención appears in the text to the number of times that the correct spelled word appears in the text.
Why do you suppose that we take the time to do this step? Don't forget that this word list will be used not only for your glossary, but also for your word count. When you're thinking about how comprehensible your story is and looking at how many times each word occurs in your text. So we want to keep it accurate, even as we clean it up for our glossary.
Now that we've done that, we want to delete the row that contains atención. We can do that in 3 ways. Either go to delete and delete sheet row. That will immediately delete the whole row. Another option is to select the row, go to edit, and then choose delete. That will also delete the row. The third option is to right-click on the row number. That will give you a pop-up menu, and there you choose delete again. And now there's only one atención. It's spelled correctly. Before we go further down the word list to check for more problems, we need to make sure that the misspelled word doesn't remain in the Word file. So we open the Word file and we click on the find icon in the top right corner, type atención, making sure that I'm typing the misspelled word because that's the one I want to find. Here it is in the text, and I corrected. And this is a really great way to use the word list to find misspelled words in your text and correct them.
Seeing an entry for the single letter K in a French or Spanish glossary should raise suspicion. It's probably from the expression okay, which is easy enough to check in the text since the letter K occurs so rarely in those languages. If I search the manuscript for K, I find okay, maman, okay, Cheryl, and okay, allez. So I was right that it is part of the expression okay. And I also realized that okay is spelled 3 different ways in the manuscript. So it gives me the chance to make my text more consistent as I decide which form to use in the glossary. Ultimately, after checking a French dictionary, I settle on okay, uppercase, with no periods, changing all occurrences to okay in my manuscript. Then I go back to the glossary and add okay, deleting the entry for O and the entry for K.
Walking down the list, we find a single word that says lo with an accent. Well, as far as I know, there's no a word in Spanish that is written like this. So I'm wondering, what is this? And to check, I go back to the Word file, type lo with an accent, and I find that it says lo. So lo is actually part of the word allo. which in some South American countries is what people say when they pick up the phone. Now, it's not an error, so we don't have to do anything in the Word file. One thing we can do is check the numbers next to lo added to the actual allo. And we go back down to the word lo and we eliminate the row.
Dealing with unexpected words. Sometimes a surprise entry will lead you to an error in the text or an error in your word list. For example, here's what looks like an English word in a French glossary. When we hunt for end in the text, we discover it's part of a hyphenated expression, weekend. So we need to delete the glossary entry for end and change the entry for week to weekend.
This entry for Mathieu is actually a translation error. In the French book, the character was called Mathieu, and in this book, his name was translated as Matus. This means that we will need to replace Mathieu by Matus in the book, and then we will delete the row here.
And here's a French word I've never seen on its own, which makes me suspicious that there might also be a oui in the glossary. So I search for oui, and voila, it appears exactly as often as aujourd'hui. This happens because Text Analyzer has stripped out the apostrophe that normally glues these two parts together. So we need to reunite them by deleting oui and putting aujourd'hui under A in the glossary.
Here we see a single letter L. I have no idea what that would mean. So we're going to check this in the Word file. We look for a single letter L, and we may need to make sure that it's just one word. And we see here that there are 3 L's as a means of stuttering, so it's not really a separate word. And now that we know this, we can go back to the Excel file and delete the row with a single letter L. And there, it's deleted.
In fact, we're going to see a boatload of unexpected entries in French because we'll find all these single letters, which are followed by an apostrophe in the text, but lose the apostrophe in the stripping process. They're not typos or errors, but they do not belong in the glossary like this. So we'll find them all and add the apostrophe back in the word list. This particular punctuation mark also presents special challenges for word lists based on English, Dutch, German, Gaelic, and Italian texts, among others. If you are a writer in one of those languages, our handout provides further strategies to keep track of apostrophes as you create your word list. And speaking of wayward apostrophes,
eliminate stray punctuation. If we've done our job well, preparing our text for the text analyzer, we shouldn't have much stray punctuation to clean up. However, there are always some problematic characters that will slip through the cracks. Remember those apostrophes? The text analyzer stripped them all out, right? Well, no, it didn't.
many fonts have 2 styles of apostrophes and quotation marks: smart or curly quotes and straight quotes. Can you see them here? The text analyzer we use apparently deletes curly apostrophes, but not straight ones. So we find occasional surprise entries like this in the word list under D, d'énergie, from precisely that spot in the text that we just looked at. So we need to deal with both d'énergie and d'entrée, and moving énergie and entrée to E in the glossary. We could go back and find beaucoup d'énergie in the text and cut and paste a curly quote over the straight quote to make the text consistent. Or we can do a later formatting pass and catch all of them in one find and replace sweep.
we still ended up with several ... dots in the Spanish list, because when I was stripping out punctuation before putting my text into the text analyzer, I didn't follow Margarita's advice to cut and paste that ... symbol into find and replace. Instead, I searched for 3 dots and deleted all of those. And now I find that the ... dots that show up in the word list are actually a single ellipsis symbol and not 3 separate dots. So we have to delete the row that has Verdon with 3 dots and make sure that we know exactly how many times Verdon appears in the text. So we change the number in front of Verdon and we delete the row that has Verdon with an ellipsis symbol.
In this one, there's another straight apostrophe that the text analyzer missed in French. This formatting glitch makes us stop and think about whether we want to include reflexive forms under S, or under the first letter of the verb, or both. And then wonder what other reflexive forms might there be that got obscured in the punctuation stripping process. As the author, you know how each word is used in your story. So an anomaly like this in your word list should make you go back and look for other instances that you may want to include in the glossary. We'll talk about this further in the 3rd video of our glossary series, Find Hidden Entries.
Decide about capitalization. Better. The text analyzer spits everything out in lowercase, so we need to restore the uppercase where needed. In the glossary, as in footnotes, we only capitalize words that are always written with a capital, like names of cities or countries. And also in cases where a word has a different meaning when it's written with a capital as opposed to lowercase. Do not capitalize all words in the glossary, and also do not capitalize words just because they are at the beginning of a sentence in your text. However, in a German text, you will need to restore the capitalization in all nouns. In the French and Spanish stories we used for the word lists in this video, there are very few characters and place names. Here's one, Cheryl. You can choose what you want to do. Either recapitalize the name, or at this point, you may want to decide whether you even need to include names in the glossary, especially names of people. If you do not want the names of your characters in the glossary, this is the time to delete them. For geographical and other names, we suggest that you wait and decide in a later step when you are adding the meanings for each entry. For now, simply correct the capitalization.
Check word order and accents. You may have noticed some glossaries where a word seems out of place alphabetically. This can happen when a sorting program does not recognize accented characters and automatically places them at the end of the alphabet. For example, niña in Spanish might be placed after ninguno because the sort program didn't recognize ñ as a variant of n. Luckily, Google Sheets and Excel sort correctly for French and Spanish. So this shouldn't be a problem for your word list, as we see here. If you're adding words later in the process, after your list has left the spreadsheet, remember that a non-accented letter always precedes an accented one in alphabetical order. So si before si, donde before donde, sur before sur, branche before branche. We know this is true for alphabetizing French and Spanish. Other languages will work differently, and Google Sheets and Excel may know the rules for other languages. Be sure to educate yourself on what's appropriate for your language. Find resources you can rely on to find out, and check your word lists to be sure they're sorted correctly.
Onomatopoeia. Your word list should show you inconsistencies in spelling of interjections and onomatopoeia, like or, and things like that. In a later stage, we will talk about the decisions you can make regarding onomatopoeia and interjections. However, for now, we will just synchronize the spelling. Your word list should show you inconsistencies in spelling of words that are more open to creative variation in your text, such as interjections and onomatopoeia. For example, here we see both a with one H and with several H's. This is something to think about. If your story uses expressive sounds like a or how many H's or M's should they have in your glossary?
Well done. Your word list is neat and clean, and you're ready for the next step. Find hidden entries.
And now for something completely different, a comprehensible input reminder. As you take each step of building your glossary, think about why you are writing a reader for language learners. If what you want is a story that is engaging and comprehensible, remember that comprehension starts at the word level. We kept the left-hand frequency column in our spreadsheet for a reason. As you scan the list looking for the 6 issues we've highlighted in this video, stop to think about the words that only occur once or twice in your text, and think about whether they are really necessary for your story. Cleaning up your glossary can also help you simplify your text. More about that in another video series.
As I was saying, you have completed step 2 in our series, building your glossary step by step. Remember, those steps are: create a word list, clean up the word list, find hidden entries, enter meanings, transfer to your manuscript, and format.
So tell us, what's your next step?
There's a handout and checklist to help you clean up your word list at this URL and QR code.
Hi, welcome to... Nope. What's your next step? Nope. I will show examples in Spanish. I will show examples in Spanish. I will give examples in Spanish. Think about why you are reading. That wasn't even so hard. We kept the left hand, what is it? Left hand.
As I was saying, as I was saying, as I was saying, as I was saying.
So what are those steps again? So what are those steps again? So what are those steps again? So what are those steps again?